LSU and Alabama kick it off this weekend live, 6:45 CBS. It has been one of the bigger games in college football over the last 15 years, this specific game, since Nick Saban came back to the ranks of college football, taking over Alabama, facing his old team, the team that he took to the national title in 2003 in LSU. But Joe, I gotta admit something. So today, in my preparation for Alabama, I went and watched the Texas versus Alabama game. Jermaine Burton had 2 touchdowns that were called back in that game. When you're able to take a step back, okay, from like live reaction, oh my God, Texas upsets Alabama. Man, that game might not have been, should have been as close as some people were thinking. 2 penalties get called, 2 Jermaine Burton touchdowns back. The truth is, which were kind of ticky-tacky, I do think that Texas maybe should have lost that game by 10. I digress with that, because here is LSU and Bama staying with that thought process. Look, Joe, we were talking about this off air about Georgia Tech, of all teams. Teams and people and players are allowed to get better throughout the year. That's what I think Alabama did. It's also what I think LSU has done defensively, even though they got some players out in that secondary. It's going to be a massive thing with the dudes that they do have out in that secondary. But I think this is a collision course for who wins it in the West. You got the number 1 offense in the country, statistically, total offense in the country, first team in the country on third down, first in first downs allowed or not allowed, first in first downs obtained this year. LSU offensively is number 1 in every offensive statistical category. Defensively, they stink. Something's going to have to give, because a lot of people think Alabama offensively stinks, even though I do not agree wholly with that they do. I think that they've gotten better since that Texas game that we just talked about. This is a collision course. 2 really, really, really good head coaches tee off. LSU beat Bama in overtime last year. How do you see this one going?
Look, I agree with you. I think a lot of teams are allowed to improve throughout the season, but I think that our judgment is a little bit clouded with talking about Alabama, where I don't think that they've necessarily improved as the season has gone on. I think that we feel that they're better than they actually are, because they've taken advantage of some advantageous matchups and some overrated teams that they have beaten. I have come to the point where I think that Ole Miss win does look good, but the rest of the victories that they've pulled out are against lopsided teams with deficiencies that they effectively attack them. Look, for me, what is so critically important that in any football game and with any football team, if your offensive line is weak, that is going to catch up to you at some point. And they have skated by and they've gotten through the slate of games that they've had without any major issues, but they still remain at the 126th spot in the country in sacks allowed. And sure, we can point out that, or you could try to claim that some of those sacks came early on in the season. They still haven't been great. They have not been good. And they're going up against a quality LSU defensive line, just as Harold Perkins is starting to hit his stride. I would be very worried. We saw last year what happened when that defensive line got after Alabama. And I think that could very well happen again in this game. The other reason why I heavily lean LSU, actually, I won't say heavily, sorry. Why I lean LSU, I got ahead of myself there. Part of the other reason why I lean LSU, when you have a team that can score as quickly as LSU can, when you've got all those receiving options and Jayden Daniels has a little bit of time to throw, you can score in 3-4 plays. If they get 2 quick touchdowns, 1 quick touchdown, Alabama can't keep up with that. Alabama doesn't have the offensive production to keep up with that. They just don't. They are, I understand, can hit some big shots, but they are not built to score quickly when they need to.
I don't disagree that LSU offensively is in my opinion, they're the best offense in the country. Now, people say that I'm biased in saying that, but I literally have every statistical category that I can back up in saying that I think that they are. The problem I have with that, Joe, is I think that they're facing a really good defense. I think they're facing a really good secondary. I do think that LSU and Brian Kelly are going to come out with some different things, such as I think you do see Malik Neighbors in the slot more. I think that you might see a guy like Kyron Lacey that is their third wide receiver that nobody is talking about. He has had some crucial drops. Obviously, the biggest one coming against Florida State, where if LSU converts there, they might be able to hang into that game. But for me, I get what you're saying about them offensively, all right, meaning Bama. But LSU has some guys out in the secondary that I think can be a very big-time mismatch for Alabama to exploit. I fully, and I mean fully, expect Alabama to come out of the gate attacking the boundary corners. Denver Harris is out. Deuce Chestnut is out. They had an injury to their best corner in Zy Alexander. Now they're down to freshmen. Okay. Very talented freshman. I will give you that. LSU had an amazing recruiting class last year. On the other side of that boundary is a converted safety that has come into a boundary corner. I know that Jalen Milroe isn't the best at lighting dudes up through the air, and he can throw deep shots. Okay. But if he can hit some, like if he can go 60% in some of the intermediate stuff that he throws, LSU could be in trouble, and they could be in that shootout. I do think that Alabama can get to 30 points on this LSU defense because of the deficiencies. Mekhi Wingo, their best interior defensive lineman, some believe, is out in this game, even though Jordan Jefferson, the backup, has been playing better than him. Mm-hmm. This is the ultimate Heisman game for Jaden Daniels. Now, I know that you've laughed. I know that you've scoffed, and you've kind of been joking with this, okay, just so LSU fans don't pile on to you here.
Yep.
You've been pretty much joking with that all year. Jaden Daniels is the star. He is the key. He's going to have to go off. Alabama defensively has had issues. Joe Milton 2 weeks ago with quarterbacks that are able to take off, and he can easily do that. But history scares me here. Saban does not lose to people back-to-back times. This is also for the West for them. Like, they are also competing for the West. I see this as a 3-point game. I think it's going to be the closest hard-hitting game that we've seen in a long time. I think LSU's offensive line is built to push around a little bit. That Bama D-line, I really do believe that LSU has the best offensive line in the SEC. They are pushing dudes around. I think they're 17th in the country in rush yards a game. That's with the number one passing offense in the country, too. Mm-hmm. If they're able to come out of the gate swinging and scoring, you would feel a lot better in this game, in my opinion.
Right. I think, you're talking about Jaden Daniels being important for this game. I kind of push back a little bit on that. And the only reason why is that we already know who Jaden Daniels is. We know that he is going to step up and make plays for his team. And he did it against LSU. He did it against Missouri. And he has somehow gotten better on a week-to-week basis against quality opponents. He will be tested, having to try and complete passes against Terrion Arnold and Cooley McKinstry, who have been the best corner duo in the country thus far. But for me, I am so hyper-focused on the line of scrimmage. I am so hyper-focused on, as you just talked about, LSU, Will Campbell, that whole group, how they perform. Emory Jones being back is important. How they perform against Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. How do they step up to the occasion? You're not going to play a perfect game, but can you at least slow them down a little bit to give Jaden time to operate? Does Jaden protect himself effectively? Does he not leave himself open to some big hits? Because that could be really, really big in this game. And then on the flip side of things, as I just talked about a second ago, can Alabama's offensive line play their best game so far this season? This is the best defensive front besides Tennessee that they have faced so far this year. They weren't perfectly clean against Tennessee. I think
what about A&M?
Oh, I completely forgot about it. It's still, when they have played those opponents, when they have faced off with those opponents, statistically, it doesn't look like they got dominated by those defensive fronts, but there were some pretty bad plays throughout those games. There were some pretty big hits that came through on Jalen Milroe throughout those games. They have to play a cleaner football game if they want to win. And on top of that, does Jalen Milroe, can he get cooking in that intermediate passing tree? Can he start to get completions near the first down marker? Can he hit those throws, or are they going to rely so heavily on the deep ball? There is a really good chance, I think, that this game plays out like the Texas game did, where they started to get cooking. They hit the ball over the top a few times with their fast, deep threat receivers, and then Alabama just could not catch up because they were trying to play a game that they're not good at. They were trying to throw the ball way more than they're capably able to do, and they were chasing. LSU is in a position to force them to do that.
Does Nick subject himself to doing that? Because it's not just Jalen Milroe that I think has gotten better over the last couple of weeks. I think Tommy Rees has gotten more comfortable in his role. Like he has called
some good games.
Yeah. But here's the thing for me. And to your point, what you're mentioning is, can Alabama sustain drives and get the ball down the field effectively enough
and be balanced
and stay with LSU? It's an interesting point that you bring up, because here's something interesting. First down offense, meaning how many first downs are you getting on a regular basis? Alabama is 97th in the country at obtaining first downs offensively. That is almost just a hair bit better, okay, like 5 first downs better than South Carolina, who's at 99, and Auburn, that's at 100. So what does that tell me? They're not able to sustain drive, at least to this exact point. They have not been able to sustain drives successfully. I think they got bailed out at A&M. Okay, I really do believe Jimbo bailed them out on the road. But after they blocked that field goal, they have been a different team. They have been very physical, special. They've tackled well. They've been more disciplined. I do agree that they are a little bit chaotic offensively, that if you take their deep ball game away, what Texas did in the second half, okay, to some extent outside the first Burton bomb. Okay?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though, Joe. They had 2 touchdowns in that game against Texas that got called back that shouldn't have been. Right? Like, Alabama had 2 touchdowns. The one that got tipped up, Burton catches it in the end zone. The long Burton touchdown, they said a snap infraction. They allow Burton in the play to completely continue. Burton scores. All right. Okay. They even call it a touchdown. I do think that if you're LSU, though, and you look at this game, Joe, how are we 1,000% sure that LSU, that is going to have to start 3 freshmen, one of the 3 freshmen on the other boundary corner, which Jermaine Burton will be lined up against? Mm-hmm. Are you 1,000% sure that they can stop Jermaine Burton from getting big time catches and receptions and yak and touchdowns against them? That is the biggest question, because we have not seen the 3 freshmen on the outside. We just haven't.
Well, let me put this out there to you. I don't think you should go out of your way to try and stop that. It's been a bait and switch. And I look, I have said this. I've given Tommy Rees credit for actually calling some really good games and producing a scheme that is very unique to their play style, and that there's not a lot of the other teams in the country doing this right now, which is grinding the ball out on the ground and then hitting you over the top, because they know that they can't complete short passes. They know that they can't complete intermediate passes. They're going to try and attack you on those 10-plus yard route concepts. I would argue what happened with the Alabama-Texas game, they locked down the line of scrimmage. They got after Jalen Milroe. They were aggressive with their defensive line. They pressured him, and they could not pick up any yards on the ground. I forget what the rushing total that they allowed was, but it was pretty bad. But they did score some touchdowns on some of those deep throws and pick up some big gains on those deep throws. And you even mentioned the ones that were called back. They were able to get that stuff, but they weren't able to win the game because they can't connect on that every single drive. They're not going to. It's unsustainable. It is a part of the game that you statistically cannot convert that way on every single drive. I think that they just need to hyper focus on the line of scrimmage and slowing down their rushing attack and just let them play desperately like they did against Texas.
I do think that you got to find a way to make Milroe beat you from the pocket.
Yes, and that's what Texas did. And if there's a team that is built to do that, it's them.
Right. Well, and what happened? I mean, look, I know Harold Perkins doesn't always line up on this side. He usually comes from the in face or the strong side. They're going to have to find a way to get him on Proctor and let him work because speed kills, and you're going to have to find a way to get to number 4 and contain him. Now,
right.
Here's what I also think, okay, before we move on here.
Okay.
I'm not 1,000% sure that they're not going to use Milroe a little bit more with his legs. I think
they've progressively been doing that more, yeah.
Correct. They're going to do everything that they can. Another thing, with that being said, I think Jaden's got to use more of his legs. I think Jaden's got
to be careful. He can't do the shit that he did against Ole Miss where he got blown the hell up. Like he can't.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He can't do that. But at the same time, okay, I'm not going to fault him for taking a big hit when he accumulated 550 total yards and 5 touchdowns.
Well, it's not a matter about faulting him. If he gets hurt,
I get it. But here's the thing with that. We've been saying that for 2 years. Hell, we've been saying it for 3 years, even when he was at Arizona State, and he keeps getting up. I mean, that's true. He got absolutely mauled by Georgia a year ago.
Yeah.
And threw for 200 yards in the first half.
But I would argue, though, medically, getting hit this much, eventually that's going to catch up to you.
Long run. But in this game, he's got to go all out like he did a year ago. Now, I'm not saying don't be smart, okay? Don't confuse by what I'm saying.
Yeah,
he's got to get smart and get down. I'm not saying that he's got to try to run people over, okay? But he killed him a year ago with his legs. I think he's got to do it again this year. And I think this is the ultimate Heisman moment for JD5. You're giving LSU's D-line a little too much credit. I digress.
You think I mean, talent-wise, I think that they're really good.
Sure, talent-wise, but I don't know if they're going to be schemed up the right way to be able to get after him.
Fair. They weren't great at the beginning of the season. I think that the Missouri performance is a little bit more reflective of what they can be. If they play that way,
I agree.
It's ball game. Look, I'm going to add this final piece to this, and I'm sure that this will piss people off. I feel like the only reason why we're giving Alabama as much credit as they are and why people are going to pick Alabama this week and why this game is going to be talked up to be close, and you even said this, it's because of Nick Saban, because this game is at home. If this was played in the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta, I don't think we'd be having the same conversation. I don't think, and if Nick Saban, okay, then I won't say that part. That would be a really stupid thing to say. I was going to say if Nick Saban wasn't the coach. Obviously, that's important. I just think that we hold these intangibles way too closely in a game like this, when for me, if we compare the strengths and the weaknesses of both rosters, LSU is far more favorable for this type of a football game when we look at these two teams.
I do think you make an interesting point, and you need to leave this in the video that you clip. I do think from an LSU perspective that we have not seen in the past. I am not saying Brian Kelly equals Nick Saban, but Brian Kelly is not. But from an in-game coaching, they are pretty much there. I mean, Brian Kelly is not a dummy.
No, he doesn't make a lot of bad decisions.
He doesn't make a lot of bad decisions. So I'm with you. All right.